Here's another video in my how-to series. In this case, it's how to run a meeting that doesn't waste everyone's time. And look, in business and in projects, we spend our entire day in meetings. They're powerful tools, or they could be huge time sinks, right? There's some weeks I have 70, 80 meetings in a week. And so the goal is we want to make every meeting as purposeful, productive, and memorable as possible. That requires an investment on our side. We have to learn how to plan and run and close these efficiently, focusing on clarity, engagement, and outcomes. What are you trying to get out of the meeting? And we don't want the common traps, long monologues, people just talking and rambling, off topic discussions, unclear next steps. You want to respect everyone's time, including yours. And at the end result is you want a meeting that gets things done. So, like I said, running effective meetings requires planning and diligence. You can't just show up. And I think there's a relationship between the amount of time you put into planning a meeting and the outcome that you get. How many times do you leave a meeting and just think, this was a complete waste of my time? I don't even know why I was here. And with the amount of workload that we have, we just can't afford to do that on a regular basis. So it starts with knowing, why are you meeting? What's the objective? Is it a decision? Is it a brainstorming session? Is it an update? What is it? And then first say, well, can it be done with an email or a chat? Then it doesn't need a meeting, right? If it does need a meeting, well, what's the outcome? You don't want just kind of check-ins or meetings without purpose where people just kind of show up and stare at each other. And right, we've had many of those meetings. It's important to share those objectives in advance with participants, and it helps people stay on topic, and it keeps your meeting focused. So once you've determined that you need a meeting, you want to create an agenda. I think it's important to send it out ahead of time. I can't tell you the number of meetings that I get with no agenda or no objectives, and I just don't know the point of the meeting. And then I can't tell, do I need to be there? Is it important or not? So the agenda should include topics and owners, and ideally a time allocation. Start with the more important items because generally speaking, most people talk well longer than you plan for, and you probably won't get to every topic. So you want to prioritize, especially if there's key decisions or next steps that are needed. You want to keep the agenda short, and like I said, you don't want generic titles like team updates so that people have no idea what that is. Ideally, you send the agenda at least a day in advance to ensure that everybody knows and can expect what to prepare, especially if you're asking them to do something or be prepared. Once you've gotten your agenda, it's important to invite the right people. You don't need everyone to be there. Avoid spectators and what I call professional meeting attenders, the PMAs, right? All they do is show up to meetings and give opinions, and then they move to the next meeting and give more opinions. If they're a decision maker, a subject matter expert, that's fine. But if they're a spectator, then you definitely don't want them there. And some of them may just need the notes afterwards. Because think about it, the more people you have, the more opinions you have, which generally lead to longer and less productive meetings. I think it's important, if possible, to let participants understand their roles. And sometimes you have to tell somebody, hey, this meeting isn't for you, right? It's not about your clarification, and we'll sync up with you offline. And maybe there's optional attenders for specific agendas. And again, you want to respect everyone's time, including yours. You don't want to over-invite. I've had meetings that have then quickly turned into what I call town halls, right, where there's literally dozens of people and only the same 3 or 4 people speak. Then you want to be respectful of time. Punctuality sets the tone, which means you want to start on time, even if people are late, unless they're the key decision maker. Maybe even keep a timer. I'll tell you now, Microsoft Teams has this facilitator agent that sits on top and sort of shows you the pace of your meeting towards the agenda. It causes a little bit of anxiety, but it is a pretty good timer. You really want to end on time. One of my pet peeves is just people who ramble on beyond the time slot and aren't considerate of other people who generally have to move to the next meeting. So then you don't want to just pad the meetings to fill up the time slot. And again, you want to show that you value people's time, and that sets the expectation for future meetings. As a facilitator, you want to guide the conversations. You don't want to lecture. Sometimes I like running meetings where I'm not the expert because then I'm one less person with an opinion and I can focus on actually getting to outcomes and results. So you want to encourage participation, again, assuming you have those people that will add value, and keep the discussions on topic. And sometimes there's parking lots, so you'll have to move things to later. Asking clarifying questions is really important. And if the discussion goes off track or becomes repetitive, I think as a facilitator's role, we can absolutely sort of try to guide us back on track or say we'll take something offline or schedule a follow-up. And if possible, balance the airtime. I mean, generally it's the same people talking, right? So you have to figure out how not to let them dominate the meeting. And check understanding frequently. All of this is sort of leading with empathy, but remaining focused on outcomes. And you want to encourage engagement. A lot of times there are those people that do a lot of the talking, but there's some people who probably have really good thoughts who don't generally talk as much. Maybe they're a little more timid, and you want to ask open-ended questions and try to facilitate their views so that they contribute. I'm a big fan of using visuals when presenting or talking rather than just speaking to bullets or sort of this open-ended topic. I think it allows people to sort of facilitate the conversation and guide it towards outcomes, and it really does help that people understand the decisions. Sometimes you might have to rotate the meetings now. Again, with AI, you don't necessarily need a note taker anymore. But where there's key points, I like writing them down so that I don't forget them. There's things like poll features that you can leverage, but there's just different ways of engaging people, and I think it focuses the meeting and it allows people to participate and walk away thinking that it was a valuable meeting. Uh, and you could tell sort of the theme of this is keeping people focused, which means sticking to the agenda, redirecting tangents, framing the discussion around decisions, maybe next steps. We've talked about this a couple times. You don't want the long updates, people who just ramble. Those can be shared in advance or via an email so that you're spending your time on way more impactful things, right? Those things that require collaboration. Maybe even have to time box the conversations so that they're not dragging on for too long. You definitely want to capture any decisions, action items, or next steps. And all of this just keeps the meeting moving towards the goal. And I will say all of this that we're talking about today requires practice. There's no one answer, and it depends on the types of meetings, and it depends on the level of the stakeholders that are there. But with practice, all of these techniques will sort of come in your toolbox. So here's at the end, you want to summarize a quick recap of decisions and actions, especially if you're going to assign somebody the work. You want to let them know that they have work that they need to do. And generally, I'll follow up with an email that highlights who specifically had the action item. Sending those follow-ups, I mentioned, generally the same day, and you want that accountability visible so that people know that, hey, you were assigned this thing and you have the follow-up, because otherwise I promise you they're going to move on to their next meeting and they're going to forget about things. And where there's unresolved items, that's where the follow-ups are needed. And all of this just prevents confusion and wasted effort. So look, to run meetings that don't waste time, we've talked about a few things. One, only meet when it's necessary. Make sure that you define the clear objectives, create that structured agenda, send it in advance, make sure that the right people are there, no professional meeting attenders, be respectful of time. But then once you're in the meeting, you want to be focused. You want to engage people as much as possible, redirect any kind of tangents that aren't directly tied to the expected outcomes, and focus on actions and decisions. And then at the end, you can recap the next steps with deadlines, and you'll follow up as needed. The result, and again, this comes with practice, is that you'll have meetings that drive results and not frustration. So those are some key thoughts. I'm sure you have other ideas. Throw them in here, and hopefully this meeting did not waste your time. And thanks for watching.